Hello, this is an olive tree and it's a pretty sorry state of affairs, I have to say. I'm currently staying with a friend in Walthamstow. This is his olive tree and he's asked me to have a look at this olive tree and diagnose what's wrong with it. So in this video, that's exactly what I'm going to do. Now, my friend is a doctor, so we're going to take a medical approach to this. We're going to ask a few questions about the olive tree, and then we're going to form a diagnosis, and then we're going to give a prescription. So when I asked my friend Christian about this olive tree, I started off by asking him, how long has it been in this pot? The answer was 6 years. So it's in a small pot, it's competing with a rosemary, and it's been in that pot for 6 years. So what does that tell you? It tells you that it's probably not got enough food around its roots. The second question is, how often have you fed this olive tree in this pot, which has been in this pot for 6 years? And the answer to that question was, I've never fed it in 6 years because I thought they were low maintenance. Well, I think they probably are low maintenance plants, but no plant is really zero maintenance, and it feels to me like Christian has been given this zero maintenance. Right, the next question is, how often has this plant been watered in the summertime? And the answer was, it's never been watered in the summertime. In fact, it's never ever been watered because it was felt that it was a low maintenance plant. Well, regards olive trees and water, they don't want to be sitting in water. They don't want wet roots, but they can't live without water. And in the summertime, when it's hot and this plant will be transpiring, it does need to be watered, and it needs to be watered probably at least twice a week. Now, I let my olive trees almost dry out between watering, and that suits them. So that's the next question I asked. Another question I asked is, when was this olive tree last pruned? And you can see it's way up here above my head. And the answer to that question is, it's never been pruned. And that's why it's got very few leaves at the centre and quite a lot of leaves on the outside. Because olive trees will produce leaves where there's light, which is usually at the extent of their growth. So that's what this is all about here. This has probably lost a few leaves as well because of its lack of maintenance, its lack of food, its lack of water, and the fact that it's been crammed into that pot for 6 years. So there we go. Now, in terms of light, the next question is, what is the aspect? Where does this plant sit? Well, it's sitting quite happily on either side of the bay window at the front of this lovely terrace cottage, but it's not south facing, so it doesn't get full light all day long. And that's one thing that olive trees love. What they like is heat and light. So that could do with being repositioned to a place where there is more light. So what's my diagnosis? Well, my diagnosis is this plant is suffering from neglect. I've looked around it. There are no obvious signs of disease or pest. It's simply a case of it having been in that pot for too long. It's probably not got any drainage at the bottom of that pot. It never gets watered, it never gets pruned, and it never gets fed. So that's my diagnosis. What do I prescribe? Well, what I'm going to do is I'm going to come back another day and I'm going to treat this plant with my prescription. And my prescription will be to take it out of that pot, take a lot of the soil away, make sure there's drainage in the bottom of that pot. Then I will add grit to the compost and I will repot it. I will remove that rosemary because that rosemary is competing. It's probably taken at least half the nutrients and the water from that pot. I'll leave an inch at the top of the pot so that I can flood it at least once a week in the growing season. I won't water it in the winter time. I'll just let it sit outside in the cold and damp, and it will survive our UK winters. I will then turn my attention to the top and I will give this a radical prune all the way down here. And that will look scary at first because it will look like a bare tree. But I promise you that will be beneficial for this plant. It will give time for the roots to start growing, and then within a few months it will start to bud fresh leaves at the bottom. And if you want to see that process taking place and proof that it's successful, I've just done it with 3 olive trees exactly like this, and I'll put the link to that video at the end of this one so you can see it played out before your eyes. It works, and it only works. Plants are like systems, and if you provide everything they need, inevitably they will survive, because that's what nature has evolved them to do. So in summary, this is suffering from neglect, and it needs some care and maintenance. It needs repotting with drainage, and it needs pruning. And then once it's started going in the growing season, it needs watering regularly. It never wants to sit in water, and it needs feeding. And then we'll have a lovely, healthy olive plant. The other thing I will do when I come back and fix this olive plant, I will do a video on it, and I'll put a link to that at the end of this one too. So there we go. Dr. Olive Tree has had a look at this olive tree and is telling Dr. Christian that this needs more care and attention. And if you do it, you have a lovely, compact, green, bushy olive plant. Hope you found that useful. If your olive tree looks like this, you now know what to do. And if you want to see it being done, there's a link right at the end of this. Bye for now.